Good evening. Welcome to the Jamie Glazov Show. Our focus this evening, people power versus Putin. The Russian people have come to the streets, gathering, protesting the thugocrat that rules over them. This has happened very suddenly and surprisingly. We have a very special guest with us this evening to give us his interpretation of the events. Igor Milchuk, Professor Emeritus of Linguistics at the University of Montreal and member of the Royal Society of Canada. He left the Soviet Union in 1977 after being expelled from the Institute of Linguistics of the Academy of Scientists because he defended Andrei Sakharov in a letter published in the New York Times. What this means is we have a modern-day freedom fighter, hero, and warrior with us today, and what a privilege and honor it is to be in the company of such a great man. Igor Milchuk, are you there?
Yes, Jamie, I am. You tell me when you allow me to talk. I'll start right away.
Okay. Okay. It's great to have you here, Igor. I have to also say on a personal note to our listeners and all the readers of Front Page that are tuning in that Igor Milchuk and his family continue to be great friends of our family, and they used to visit my family when I was a very little boy, and I have very fond memories. But Igor, I'm still a little bit confused. You had two daughters, and there was Greg and I, and when we were little,
exactly.
We had made plans that Greg and I were supposed to marry your beautiful daughters. What happened?
Yes, but they married someone else's, and now one has two daughters and another one has three kids. It's unbelievable, Yasha.
Wow, congratulations. So I guess Greg and I got left out in the cold, I guess. Well, Igor, I want to get to what's happening in Russia today and your perspective on it. But first I want to talk a little bit about you and give our listeners a bit of a background on the great man that we're speaking to, because it's really...
Well, great man. I am 166 only. I'm not great.
Well, I think you are. So anybody that stood up against the Soviet regime, what great courage. So let me ask you, give us a little bit of background, Igor. Specifically, for instance, how is it that you came to write that letter in defense of Andrei Sakharov? How come you weren't pro-communist and was just one of the obedient slaves in the Soviet Union during that time? What made you do that?
Well, you see, to answer fully, you asked a very difficult question. It's a question about human existence, in a sense. So probably I'm unable to answer it in 3 or 5 minutes. I'll tell you only what really pushed me to this last act of my life in the Soviet Union, because after that I was dismissed from my job, persecuted by the police, and I had to emigrate. Exactly before it happened, a few months before it happened, I met Sakharov personally. He didn't speak English fluently, and when he was meeting foreign correspondents, he used the help of his younger friend, Natan Sharansky, who is now in Israel and was a minister, etc., etc. And then what happened, Sharansky got arrested, and Sakharov was supposed to meet with the press, and there was no interpreter. And then, through a common friend, it was Tatiana Velikanova, by the way, an absolutely brilliant woman, and that's another story. He asked me whether I would do that. You see, I must say, I was afraid, because quite a few people surrounded Sakharov got killed. But when such a person asks you to help in such a way, I said yes, and twice I met Sakharov serving as his interpreter. Also, after that, he had a kind of not a real heart attack, but some problems with his heart, and was hospitalized.
Just a second, Igor, wait, 1 second. When you're his interpreter, what language was he speaking? Oh, you had to interpret into English, right?
In English, yeah, for the foreign correspondents. He spoke Russian, right, and mostly he understood their questions. He read English without problems, but he had no conversational practice.
Okay.
So he needed someone to explain better to people what he wanted to say.
Right.
Okay. And just a few days after that, he had a problem with his heart, was hospitalized in an emergency room, and since he was there, he was not allowed to work or do anything. He asked the same common friend whether I would like to visit him there. Of course, I ran to the hospital and spent about 1 hour and a half, 2 hours with him. Politics were never mentioned. His questions were only strictly scientific within my domain, languages and human ability to speak, etc. And I returned so I had all in all 3 meetings with him. But after that, I was really smitten. You know, when you fall in love, you forget about yourself. It was something like that. I saw in front of me almost an angel. I knew quite well, I was cynical enough to understand him. Of course, he was not an angel, and he made mistakes in his life, etc., etc. But until these 3 short meetings, I have never seen such a profound, convinced, and pure human being. And then, a week later, I read in Soviet newspapers that Sakharov is almost a thief, that he has 5 cars, and I don't know, I don't remember. He was smeared in the worst type of crap, and they would say that all members and workers for the Academy of Sciences approve Sakharov was relieved of his title of academician, etc. And I couldn't stand that. I became kind of, I lost my mind. I wrote right away this letter where I said, maybe all of them, but -1. I cannot accept that, and I
now,
don't...
Igor, were you, you said in the beginning you were scared to even interpret for Sakharov. By this stage, were you scared to write the letter, or you had
I don't remember. No, I don't think so.
Yeah. And
somehow, you see, it's very difficult. It was more than 45 years ago, and I was in a...
Did you have family members or people that were telling you, no, please don't do it?
Oh, no. You see, I was very lucky in my life. Okay. When I met my wife, and when we married, it was 56 years ago, we never thought about important things on different planes, I would say. We could disagree about the quantity of salt in our soup, yes, but nothing more important than that. So she was supportive from the very beginning. And exactly, when I was supposed to get home from this meeting, she would go to the subway station with one of our daughters. She was afraid for me and believed that, inside the subway, no one will attack me.
Right.
But in the streets between the subway station and our house, like 15-minute walk, but it was, the outskirts of Moscow. Mm-hmm. So she would accompany me to make sure if I am attacked, she's there to be a witness, and maybe it will stop the attackers.
Wow, what a brave, heroic couple.
You see, but we didn't see. I swear, I never felt or thought in these terms. I was doing, when you go, to eat or to a bathroom, you do physiological things because you cannot do otherwise. It
Perhaps
was the same for me.
Do you think that maybe, that Andrei Sakharov, he had a divine spirit? It may have become contagious and also taken over you in a sense, right?
In a sense, it could be. I don't know, but you see, my problems with the Soviet authorities started very early in my life when I was an adolescent, but exactly because I was a convinced communist. I was a Stalinist in my youth. Mm-hmm. But I am a logical person, and I tried to be consistent with my convictions.
Okay, just a sec. Igor, were you anti-Soviet when you met Andrei Sakharov? Did you already have...
Yes. Oh, yes. At this
so
time...
you had the impulses, okay.
Oh, yes. At that time, I was terribly anti-Soviet already.
So were you ready to be arrested at any time after writing...
Well, to tell you the truth, no, I would prefer not to be arrested.
But you were ready. right? It was
Well, I cannot say that. I did what I believe was important, and that's it.
Before we
and
move
as
on,
far as I remember, I was not really afraid. You see, when you don't see a real physical danger, when you don't see a pistol pressed against your forehead, well, why should you be afraid? If it happens, it happens, and then you are afraid.
Igor, before we move on, tell us, very briefly, what were a few beautiful qualities of Andrei Sakharov? What could you crystallize for us? What did he represent?
That's very difficult. You see, you must be a great writer to do that in words. The way he thought and the way he asked his questions and reacted to my answers, it was very precise and, I would say, sharp as a scalpel of a surgeon. And at that time, extremely gentle and kind of, like old Russian intellectuals do. So it was a combination of things that you would believe cannot be combined. And
Igor,
in his person, they were combined.
So, Igor, it was probably impossible that such a man with his conscience and nobility could follow along with the Soviet regime, correct?
No, but I don't know whether you know how he started. Because when he was very young, well, not as young, he was already a well-known scientist and one of the leaders in the building the super bomb. And if it's true what I have read, you see, I cannot guarantee the correctness or accuracy of this information, but it seemed that when they tried the famous super bomb, exploded it for the first time, the military told him that they don't need such a huge power because there will be no place, no theater where such a bomb can be used. Oh, he said, no, there is such a theater. You can blow it up on the bottom of Atlantic Ocean close to the American shores, and then all big cities will be washed away. And the admiral who was kind of leading this conversation said that he is ashamed and the Soviet army would never try to destroy population.
So he was on the dark side at one time.
Yes, exactly. And he changed. Yes. He had the strength and the courage, the kind of a very calm. He was never hysterical. He was never speaking in loud voice. And he could go through all the torture. People were sitting on his face to feed him forcefully.
Yeah.
And
Igor,
you see,
we only have a half an hour.
I want to get over. I'm too talkative.
If you can be a bit briefer, because I want to touch on several topics with you, because it's such a pleasure and privilege to have you. Let me ask you this before we move on. Who were some other dissidents that had your respect and that you admire till this day, looking back?
The other one, and exactly, they were kind of united for me, and I wrote about both of them at the same time, was Sergei Kovalyov. Sergei Adamovich Kovalyov, a physicist who, it's again a long story. He became known to me because he acted in a defense of a Lithuanian sailor who tried to flee to the United States, jumping a ship from the Soviet trawler to an American gunboat.
Right.
The American captain returned him to the Soviets, and he was almost killed. Yeah. You remember that? No, you were too young.
No, I mean the case. I know about the case.
Yes, and exactly, Kovalyov, who was born in Lithuania and spoke fluent Lithuanian, found the mother of this guy. She was a single mother, and she was American by birth. Therefore, automatically, according to American laws, this guy was American. Right. And Kovalyov did all that, just slapping the Soviet authorities. He obtained all the documentation about his American origins and get him released.
Yeah.
Well, after I learned about that, you see, he became kind of my idol.
Okay.
And then, when he was very sick, he had a tumor in his rectum, and exactly he didn't want, and his family didn't want, for him to be operated in a jail hospital because it would mean death. Well, we tried to organize a campaign, not for his release, but just he could not even stand upright, not
right.
speaking of fleeing, for him to be operated in a normal hospital of his choice. And we tried to talk to different academicians to support our pledge, and no one wanted to do that. And I was in such a fury that, you see, if I could, I would be killing them. And that's also pushed me to write the letter, because I wrote about both of them.
I see. Okay, Igor, briefly, what led you into linguistics? Like, what is it? You speak many languages?
No. Linguistics is not about speaking languages. It's about learning how the language is encoded in the human brain.
Yeah, the way that Chomsky studies it, right?
Well, in a sense, yes, except that me and him are as opposed in everything as could be. You know, he's a horrible Martian for me.
Now, did your field of linguistics, does that in some ways make a case against totalitarianism and regimes like the Soviet Union?
I cannot say anything special about linguistics. Science, any science, makes a good case. Mm-hmm. Well, it depends. You have to kind of conjugate the science with high morality, and then you obtain a case. Because science teaches you to behave automatically in an honest way, in a consistent way. A scientist cannot stand contradictions.
I see.
And if to boot you have a normal human nature, well, these two things taken together guarantee that you will be against any totalitarian state or dictatorship.
Yeah, that's fascinating. Igor, when you left the Soviet Union, you clearly you got freedom for yourself and your family. You could have ended up in the Gulag. Let me ask you this: have you missed Russia? Has the immigration experience?
No, not even once, Yasha. Not even once. I tried all I could to stay in the country. Mm-hmm. I was born there, and Russian is my only normal mother tongue. And all my culture is Russian, and I believe that it's my country. And it pushed me out. And all my colleagues at my institution, with whom I lived together in a very close contact and collaboration for about 30 years, betrayed me right away. Mm-hmm. You know, I was expelled from the institution where I worked by a secret ballot. And among 32 people, only 2 abstained. 30 of them voted against me. And not only the vote was, of course, as everything in the Soviet Union, about my standing as a scientist, whether I was worth of renewing my contract as a researcher. Well, I was the best in the institute. It was clear even to a complete idiot. And they voted against it. Can you imagine something like that?
Wow. Well,
and therefore I had absolutely not even 1 second of regret. I returned to Russia several times after the fall of Berlin Wall and when the Soviet Union doesn't exist anymore. Well, I became a foreigner who speaks fluent Russian without accent, and that's it. It's not my country anymore.
But you may have been betrayed by many people and etc., but did your heart long for, the отношения между людьми and the warmness of the Russians?
Yes, you see, but there were a few friends who stand up for me.
Yes.
And stood up then and continue.
But
so
you were
not
very
everybody.
Yeah.
But most of people for whom I believed, well, you see, your life must have a sense. And I believed that I was contributing to Russian science and helping my Russian and non-Russian colleagues, etc., etc., and they did not give a damn for all that.
Yeah, Igor, I want to get to Putin. We only have a few minutes left, but briefly, very quickly, in terms of Mandelstam, Pasternak, Maria Tsvetaeva, Bulgakov, Dostoevsky, can you speak a little bit about the literature in Russia and literature that inspired you, or that?
That's also a very good question, and I will give a very positive answer.
Okay.
Yes, that's a kind of a very specific feature of the life in Russia, even in 19th century, and more so in the Soviet times, since our lives were so incredibly limited physically. Mm-hmm. Intelligent people lived in literature, in novels. So the books had much more influence about all of us, including me or your father or your mother. Maybe not, well, you were already living your life here, then it is normal. It was abnormal. But we were victims of our excellent literature. That's absolutely true.
Igor,
and Russian writers were behaving and suffering like real soldiers.
Yeah.
Many
Igor,
of them died just, in prisons or in front of firing squads and ended really, Mandelstam was killed in a concentration camp. Tsvetaeva hanged herself because she was really driven into a dead end, etc., etc.
We only have a couple minutes left. Please, very briefly with each question, because I got to touch on something.
Okay.
But I have to ask you, please, very briefly. In some ways, Solzhenitsyn was a hero, but in other ways, he was against democracy, and he was very critical and condescending towards other dissidents. Is that true for me to say that?
Yes, I never met him. I was a very good friend of his wife. I was her friend even before she met him, and remained her friend until the very last days of my stay in Russia. I visited her maybe every 2 weeks or sometimes even twice a week, and I never met him in a small apartment. He didn't want to see me because he was absolutely rabid Russian nationalist. And for me, any kind of nationalism or fanaticism are absolutely unacceptable. You see, it's stronger than my civilization, than my education. When I see such a person, I cannot stand him.
Yeah,
and
Igor,
therefore,
very sad to hear about Solzhenitsyn. Igor, but I'm sorry, we have to move on here for a minute. The Russian people, in many ways, almost seemed like they want a dictator. It was very depressing for my family that Putin came to power. So many Russians loved Putin. It's depressing. And now all of a sudden the Russian people are in the streets. Does this inspire you a bit and give you hope? What's happening?
You see, I cannot understand what is happening. According to a few friends whom I trust 100%, it is still a very local event. The number of people who take part in all those manifestations and meetings and demonstrations are maybe several 100,000, and it's among 140 million. Mm-hmm. So it's just the tip of an iceberg. Right. Whether there is a massive support, I don't know, and Putin and his band invested so much in this system that they cannot let go like that. I don't know what will happen, but
Igor,
I'm not very optimistic.
Igor, when George Bush said he looked into Putin's eyes and saw some kind of a great soul, what exactly happened there? I mean,
Bush, you see, with all my respect for him, Bush was a very good president, and I was 100% for him, but he was not a very bright man. He was simply a stupid person, and he didn't see McCain, or who said he saw in these eyes only KGB and nothing else.
Igor, when you look at Putin, what do you see? Is this
I see something that makes me to run to the bathroom to vomit. I cannot see this face. Even before I knew a word about him, when I saw him marching in Kremlin on this red carpet, it is impossible. People who vote for a rat, he is a rat and nothing else.
Is he evil, Igor?
Oh, he is terribly evil. He is a born mafioso. I don't know whether he tried to join KGB when he was 14 or 15 for the first time. So it is a person who saw his career from the very beginning, and when he was a KGB officer in Germany. He was mixed up with narco business.
Right.
Through a German. Well, it's a complicated story. Maybe you know that.
He's a mafioso KGB man. Igor,
exactly,
we only have a couple
exactly.
minutes left. We're going to go to our callers because so many people love you. We're very excited you are coming on. Please.
Yes, so I'm waiting for you. Yes.
Okay, so please, only 30 seconds or so for an answer. Stephen Brown is calling from Toronto, Canada.
How you doing, Jamie?
Hi, Stephen. Thank you for calling from Toronto. You were able to get away from the hunting of the polar bears there temporarily?
Oh, yeah, you know, it was tough. One nearly bit my arm off, but, you know, I fought it off with my whalebone
You
knife.
it's mostly igloos in Toronto, am I correct?
Yeah, it's pretty cold up here in the Great White North, you know.
Yeah,
That's
Stephen,
a
very quick question for the hero and modern-day warrior we are speaking with today.
Well, I'm not a hero. That's the first answer.
Okay, okay, go ahead, Stephen.
Mr. Milchuk, first I just want to say, you know, I admire very greatly you and the other dissidents because you stood up to a brutal totalitarian regime and all you had was your bare hands.
I didn't really stand up. I just lived the only way I'm able to live, and that's
it. Thank you. Stephen, quick question, please.
Okay, what do you think Andrei Sakharov would think of what's going on in Russia now, about Putin and about the demonstrations?
He would be more than happy. He would be in the first row of these people. Even if he were unable to walk, he would, you know, crawl in front of them. He liked Russia and wanted to see it a normal country. And of course, that's exactly what he wanted the second half of his life when he became a normal person.
But Igor, is Russia a normal country? Do you have hope?
No, it is not a normal country. It's a very strange. It's not even a third world country. I don't know. It's I have no comparison. It's like North Korea.
But have you given up on the Russian people, or is what's happening lately inspired you that there are brave Russians who do want to...
You see, there is not a contradiction. I gave up on Russian people as a generalization.
Right.
But I know about many, hundreds, if not thousands, extremely courageous Russian men and women whom I admire. They're real heroes. They're paying with their lives sometimes for what they're doing.
Let's go quickly to Mark calling from Atlanta, Georgia. We just have a minute left. Go ahead, Mark. A quick question for Igor Milchuk. Mark from Atlanta, Georgia. Are you there?
Mark disappeared.
Daniel, is Mark there? Okay, something has happened. Okay, so Igor, right?
That's KGB is interrupting our conversations.
Igor, with the minute that we have left, just a second, Igor, with the minute that we have left, therefore, what are the chances in your mind that Putin will be thrown out within a year or two and Khodorkovsky will be released and we'll see a beautiful Russian spring? What do you think?
Well, I would be ready to drink a liter of vodka to this occasion and drop dead immediately afterwards because it's such a relief for the world. Russia, it's a sixth part of the world. So if things go better in Russia, things will go better in the United States and Canada, in the whole of the world. So, of course, I will, if I could do something, I will go and do. But
Igor,
I'm not very optimistic.
You said
I'm
you were
cautiously optimistic.
Igor, I know you said in the beginning you were a Stalinist in your youth. When Stalin died, did you weep?
No, at that moment I had over 20 years and I understood many things. And just 3 years before Stalin's death, there were very important events in my life that made me more and more anti-Stalinist, first of all, and then anti-communist in general. But that time, no, I wouldn't buy all this crap anymore.
If Putin died today, would you weep?
Oh, I would right away run for a new bottle of vodka.
A new bottle of vodka. Igor, last words from you. Let me ask you very quickly. The new president of the United States, let's say, comes in, Gingrich or Romney, let's say they beat Obama, and you get a phone call, and Romney or Gingrich says to you, give me advice on how I should deal with Russia, what would you say to him?
You see, between these two, I slightly prefer Gingrich.
Mm-hmm.
I cannot say that he is charming or very charismatic, but I think he would make a better president. How to deal with Russia, I cannot give tactical advice. Mm-hmm. I am not a politician or diplomat, but I believe that what should be done openly and consistently, the United States should always support the opposition to any dictatorship. Mm-hmm. Many years ago, Yugoslavia, the United States and Europe did not support sufficiently the opposition against Milosevic, and then we had a war. You see, so you have to press them. You cannot believe them. Whatever the government now says is a lie. They will betray us and the Russian people at the first, before the first occasion presents itself.
Igor, we have run out of time. Igor Milchuk, it was a great honor and a privilege to speak to you. Thank you very much. Will you come back on the
sentence, Jamie? I am happy that you invited me. You are the first voice in this terrible desert, informational desert in the United States and Canada, where no one talks about truth and real facts in life. Everything is polite correctness, and I hate that. And I'm so happy and so thankful that you exist and invited me.
Thank you.
The best of possible New Year's, Jamie.
That means very much coming from you to me. I'm very touched and honored that you would say that. Let's make a deal that the next time you come on the show, both of us will drink Russian vodka together, okay?
Okay, you have to warn me, so I should have something in my freezer.
Okay, всего хорошего, большое спасибо. Thank you, Igor.
Bye, Jamie, bye. I'm hanging up, yes?
Okay, yes, thank you very much.
Yes.
That was Igor Milchuk visiting us to discuss people power versus Putin. Our next guest, Konstantin Preobrazhensky. Are you there, my friend?
Yes, I am. Thank you for inviting me, Jimmy.
Konstantin, thank you very much for coming. Konstantin Preobrazhensky is a former KGB agent who became one of the KGB's harshest critics. He's a senior fellow at Gerard Group International, and he is the author of 7 books about the KGB and Japan. His new book is KGB FSB's New Trojan Horse, Americans of Russian Descent. Mr. Preobrazhensky is an expert of how Putin's spies and the KGB are infiltrating and weakening America. Konstantin, what a pleasure to have you here. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, too.
Konstantin, before we get into some of these issues, you've been listening to some of the discussion. What is a brief comment you'd like to make before we begin our discussion in terms of what you've heard Igor Milchuk saying?
I totally agree with Igor Milchuk and hope that some positive changes will take place in Russia and that America will become sober about Russia.
What is wrong with America and Americans? Why aren't they sober about what's happening? Are they naive? Have the Russians tricked us? Is it a deception? Is it a self-deception? What do you think is wrong?
I think that they have made too much expectations about democracy in Russia. They thought that if Russian people have abandoned communism, then everything is fine in Russia. I have heard from many American commoners, common people, saying the following: when I told them what is really taking place in Russia, they told me, really? I thought Russia was okay. That's one thing. And second thing is that there is great Russian influence here in America, which has been lasting for 70 years already. So just 3 generations of people working for Russia. Plus, as Lenin said, some intellectuals are useful idiots. Lenin was using this term, useful idiots, about bourgeois liberal intellectuals who were helping Soviet Russia.
Right, many useful idiots in the West, absolutely. Konstantin, Putin is a KGB man. He's ruthless, They've assassinated and killed many people. Do you think he's going to hold on to power? What's happening there? Are you inspired by how the Russian people all of a sudden are in the streets?
You see, Jamie, my impression is contradictory. Of course, I am inspired. At the same time, I feel concerned. While I'm inspired, it's understandable, because I did not expect that so many people in Russia would venture to go openly to streets and to protest. Why am I concerned? Because these people, the protesters, have stopped halfway. What did they criticize? The elections, which were not just. But it is impossible to expect just elections, fair elections, from the current political system in Russia. It is just the thing is that Putin has managed to create the state system of totally new type, a KGB state or petro state, vertical social system, which does not need any elections. People there are appointed, not elected. So from the very beginning, all the elections are imitation. In general, Russian democracy now is imitational. It means that many of those people really did not understand that the democracy is imitational, and they really hoped for fair elections from the current political system.
Konstantin, in many respects, of course, you come from the belly of the beast, it could be said. You are former KGB. I mean, so you have a very, very rare and obviously perceptive view of everything that's happening. Could you briefly tell us, how did you get into the KGB and why did you leave?
The thing is that I have a specialty, which is Japanese studies, Japanology. And in the period of my youth, in the 70s, it was only one way for a specialist in this or that country, like Japan, China, America, France, all the Western countries, and plus China. It was only one way for them to work in those countries, to visit them, to be connected with KGB. For me and for us, the young intelligentsia people, there were two choices. First, to become a collaborator, an agent. It's a humiliating position. You are very much dependent on KGB. It's KGB informant. And the other option was to become a KGB officer. That's just a much more profitable position, more stable. And
Konstantin, before we move forward, Putin himself, he is an informer, correct?
Yes, people say that he was an informer in his younger years. It's possible. We have no evidence, but it is possible, yes.
Yeah, okay, so go on. So what happened?
With me?
Yes.
Yes, so just I managed to be taken to intelligence of the KGB, which was very, very difficult to be done. But my father was the deputy head of the KGB frontier troops, and he helped me. And Andropov personally has allowed me to join KGB intelligence, saying the following: this obedient boy differs from the children of other leadership of the KGB. So I worked in Japan as a correspondent of telegraph agency of the Soviet Union, as TASS. Wrote a few books on Japan. Then I had spy scandal in Japan while working on China, and I returned to Moscow. Has suffered a lot of humiliations after all this scandal, and in 1991 I have left KGB in fear of the period of terror of coup d'etat, which all were expecting.
But you in your, Konstantin, you in your soul and in your psyche somewhere had realized that you were working for an evil totalitarian regime?
Of course.
And your conscience was hurting you?
Of course it was. It was a really great problem. You understood that very well. But I had no other choice. You know, there is such a proverb in Russia: "С волками жить, по волчьи жить." To live with wolves means to like them, something like this. So I had no choice. It was the situation common for all the Soviet intellectuals, not only me.
Konstantin, during that time that you were KGB, did you look with admiration at people who were on the other side and had the courage to stand up? Who were some dissidents that you knew that the KGB was persecuting, but yet you had respect for them in your heart?
Well, of course, first of all, it is academician Sakharov.
Yeah, he's number one, I think, right?
Yes, he's the first whom I have mostly admired. But in general, I was working in the scientific and technical intelligence, which was far from dissidence. So just in every KGB directorate, there is a principle of separation of information. So in spite of the fact that I was working in the KGB, I was not mixing people who were working in the 5th directorate and were just pursuing dissidents.
Mm-hmm. What did you think about the singer Vladimir Vysotsky?
Vladimir Vysotsky?
Yeah.
Well,
was the KGB worried about him? Do you know?
It's a very complicated story. I'm not keen in this problem. Yeah. I'm not keen. KGB worried about him, yes, but at the same time, he was going abroad. He was allowed to go abroad,
yeah,
and so on.
Were you moved by his music?
Since I was born, I prefer mostly classical music.
Oh,
in this perspective, I differ from other teenagers, but I like his music very much. Yes.
What classical music do you like?
Pardon?
What classical music do you like?
First, of course, Beethoven, Mozart, and among Russian composers, Tchaikovsky and Glinka, Dargomyrsky, those who were supporting the wonderful musical tradition of the 19th century. And, of course, I like Russian church music very much.
Wow, I'm talking to a very cultured man. Now, when you say Russian church music, are you also a religious man?
Yes, of course, I believe in God, and I was describing in my books.
Wait, are you a Christian?
Yeah, of course, yes.
But Konstantin, did you have to keep your faith in Christ a secret while you were a KGB man?
Yes, of course. It was very hard to be done. I have written a lot about it in my book KGB in Japan, which was published in Moscow in 2000. So yes, I was considering it. I was almost disclosed, but still I managed to conceal it. So people in KGB felt that I might be a believer.
Now, Konstantin, since we brought up faith, let me ask this. In terms of Dostoevsky, for instance, in The Grand Inquisitor, when Christ is rebuked for giving freedom to man, do we see a parallel somewhere in the Russian character that somewhere do you think that Russians do not want freedom, that freedom is too much of a burden for them to bear, and that's why somewhere collectively they've allowed these strong dictators to rule over them?
Yes, and unfortunately, many Russians don't like freedom, don't want freedom. They just told it to me in Russia. No, I don't want freedom. I want not luxurious, well-off life, nothing more. And when I tell here in America to Americans that some Russians say that I don't want freedom, they can't understand it. For a Western person, it is normal. But our Russian tradition is so specific that many people don't understand. The very word freedom, svoboda, has appeared in Russian language not centuries ago, in some not too long time ago.
But Konstantin, somewhere, it's been depressing for all of us from Russia that, when we see that Russia had a chance for democracy and we see Putin and murdering people and ruling and so many Russians supporting him. But right now I can say even for my mother is so excited and even proud finally for the Russian people, because When you see 100,000 people gathering in Moscow, standing up against this brutal thug and KGB mafiosa, isn't it inspiring to see that perhaps Russians don't want to be slaves? Perhaps they are standing for liberty finally.
These people were mostly intelligentsia. On the other hand, in province, there were no such massive protests. And intelligentsia is to some extent even disliked by some other Russians. Many people in Russian province like Putin and don't like intelligentsia. So the thing is how long their protest will last.
What do you think? Are you hopeful? What are you hoping for?
I think that by now, in the current moment, the state authority, the government, the KGB, has enough power to calm them down.
And they might become ruthless again, am I correct? Putin might be waiting and become ruthless again, right?
I think that he might choose a very specific Russian way, Soviet way, to drown these protests in endless discussions. You know that he said that he is open for negotiations, and the negotiations have begun already. So they will last for a very long time, and just the heat of the protests may go down.
We have some callers calling in, Konstantin, but before we go, I want to ask you, you said, some music that inspired you. In terms of Russian literature, what moved you as you grew in your youth, and, what left an indelible mark on your intellectual journey? What literature?
I most of all, I like two authors, Leo Tolstoy and Chekhov. Chekhov especially Chekhov has expressed the soul of Russian intelligentsia best of all. And my ancestors in the imperial period were Russian intelligentsia too. So I was so much hopeful to get back into the past and meet people of the past intelligentsia, the intelligence of the past time, and to some extent I had got such a chance after coming to America and see the immigrants from Russia, from the white Russia, who has retained the spirit of the white imperial Russia, which has inspired me greatly. I had felt a feeling of, I have enjoyed the feeling of sweet nostalgia about the past of Russia.
Konstantin, is your life in danger today?
Well, all the lives are in danger to some extent, but I have said so much already that I don't need to care. Yes, it is in danger, but as a believer, I rely on God, on our God Jesus Christ, on His will. We should rely not on our will, but on God's will.
Amen. We are going to go to the phone lines.
Yes, please.
To discuss with Konstantin Preobrazhensky that is joining us today. Our phone lines are coming in. Mark from Atlanta, Georgia, are you there, sir?
Yes, I am, Jamie. Thank you for taking my call.
Do you have a question for our guest, sir?
I do. Konstantin, I find your history fascinating, and I know that you've written, just to return to a moment to your Christian faith, I also happen to be a Christian and quite familiar with the Eastern Orthodox Church, and I know that you have written that the KGB has been in the process of infiltrating the Russian Orthodox Church abroad. I'm wondering if you could elaborate on that just a little bit. How is that taking place?
Oh, just now we can see the consequences of this process. Yes, the part of Russian Church abroad who has surrendered to Moscow and became a part of Moscow Patriarchate, which was created by KGB, by Stalin, and which is controlled by KGB, but by Putin now. They are suffering bitter disappointment. They do not get anything from Moscow. On the other hand, the Moscow's political influence in America has grown up greatly after the part of the Russian Church abroad, not the whole one, only the part. has joined with Moscow. I am a disciple of the Russian Church abroad, which has retained its independence.
Konstantin, is the Russian Orthodox Church in the West infiltrated by KGB?
Yes, of course. It has been infiltrated, I think, in early 20s. It's unbelievable. But the very first one of the very few metropolitans who has left Russia during the Civil War and who has formed here in Europe Russian Church abroad just 90 years ago. Now we're celebrating its 90th anniversary. This person became very pro-Soviet and was acting not in the direction good for Russian Church abroad. That's the thing, the problem, that in the imperial period, in the early 20th century, a lot of Russian Orthodox clergy became leftists, and a lot of fighters with religion, atheists and anti-religious activists has come from families of clergy. It's a very dramatic history.
We're going to go to Toronto, Canada. Our caller, Steve, are you there?
Yes, I am, Mr.
You have a question for our guest, Stephen?
Yes, I'd like to say, first I'd like to say, I've been very impressed with your contributions when you've been on Jamie's symposiums. I've read and I've also was interested that you're very interested in the Russian past, the pre-revolutionary past, and I look at your last name, Preobrazhensky, and of course that's one of the most famous Russian regiments founded by Peter the Great and equivalent to the British Coldstream Guards. I was wondering, how does KGB ever let you in with a name like that? It's such an aristocratic name.
Yes, it's a very good question.
And let me add to that. You also say that you come from some family that are intelligentsia. How did a man become KGB from intelligentsia family? Maybe I'll combine that to Steve's question.
Yes. At the same time, when I was a youth, people asked me, how did your grandfather have survived with such a family? Of course, it was a sort of exception because my father was a deputy head of the frontier troops, and only thanks to his influence, I have managed to enter KGB. What about my father? He has entered the KGB construction department, not intelligence, but military construction. He was a military construction engineer just after the war, when there was a lack of specialists. So he was not a KGB officer in this classical understanding, but deputy head of troops or frontier troops for construction and rear. So that's, of course, it is exception.
Konstantin, were some of your family hurt or upset that you became KGB?
No. It was a great success. In the Soviet period, it was a great happiness. If a son has joined the KGB system, it was a pride of the family. By the way, it is the same in today's Russia. When I was living in Moscow until I went here in 2003, many people told me with happiness, oh, my son was a soldier in the KGB FSB troops. Such a great honor for our family. Oh, my son became a student of the KGB school. It's such an honor. Russian people even now love KGB very much. That's why many of them are supporting Putin.
Konstantin, then, was some of your family upset or scared when you left the KGB?
No. My father has died before that. And my father, of course, was a secret Christian, and he was also critical to the current system. That's why he died in a very early age. And nobody else was upset, of course. Nobody else was upset because it was...
Konstantin, let me touch briefly. You seem to have quite an interest in Japan. What exactly, explain this to us. You love Japanese culture and history, or what is your interest and what do you see there?
Oh, I love Japanese culture very much. Japan has very strange, charming. It is this unbelievable combination of the contemporary development of science and technology on the one hand, and on the other hand, the spirit of the 18th century, of the 17th century, of the samurai medieval history. So the strange combination of these two opposite elements makes a very strange and unusual expression. That's why, in the age of only 22, after returning from study at the Japanese Tokai University to Moscow in 1975 or 76, I have written a short novel which is called Karate Begins with Bows, about Japanese sport. And it explained how these both contradictions are exposing themselves in the life of Japanese youngsters. This short novel and one more short novel, very old Yubagada, were later published by the Academical Anthology of the Soviet Union, of Academy of Science of the Soviet Union, in the book Soviet Authors on Japan, for the 70 years of the Soviet power. I was youngest in this long row of writers, most of whom have died by that time already.
Konstantin, we just have a few minutes left. Do you miss your homeland? Do you miss Russia? Have you ever gone back to visit, or is it too dangerous for you to do so?
Oh, of course I cannot. I cannot go there. To say if I miss, no, because Russia is here in church. When I go to church, I feel atmosphere of Russia. Besides that, I just mixing with many Russian people here. In the previous years, I have returned to Russia, to the Soviet Union, home from abroad. And each time when you return there, you feel some cold, as if you're coming to the cold water. The atmosphere differs. So in this respect, I am calm. I am confident. I am calm, and don't feel any special sorrows.
We just have a minute and a half left. Mark from Atlanta, would you like very briefly a brief comment or final question for our guest?
Yes, Konstantin, I'm wondering, Jamie's earlier guest, Igor Melchuk, made the comment that for a scientist or an intellectual, it's impossible for a true scientist, it's impossible to tolerate a contradiction. And I'm wondering, as far as truth goes, I'm wondering how much did that play a role in your decision to leave the KGB, knowing, having your Christian faith and feeling in your heart that this was an evil regime that you were working for? I mean, how did that affect you?
Briefly, please.
It affected my health a lot. I have got a lot of health problems. I understood it not only in the end of my career, but in the 70s when I have entered. It was Brezhnev's regime. I understood what it was. That's why I began to write seriously a book about KGB as soon as I got there to the KGB school in Minsk. That's why I was able to publish the book on KGB very early, as soon as I left it. It was I was in 91 and in 1994.
Thank you. Our time is almost over. Stephen Brown, final quick question or comment.
Okay, I've been reading how these demonstrations in St. Petersburg and Russia, they're mostly a middle-class movement. I've read how workers have offered to Putin to go to St. Petersburg and break up these demonstrations. What do you see in the future?
Yeah, I think these demonstrations says that it's mostly
in the future. I see that they will be tried to become down. Nobody will allow them to create a revolutionary party. So these movements will retain being dispersed, disintegrated, just not in a form of strict organization.
But do they want a revolution?
I'm sorry, our time is up. Konstantin, one quick question. You have 10 seconds to answer, please. Is Barack Obama a smart man a stupid man, a destructive man? Very quickly, is this the man we need in office to deal with Russia?
I don't know. I think that the politics of reloading, changing relations of America with Russia was maybe too quick. Russians didn't like it. Russia doesn't want good relations with America.
Thank you, Konstantin. We're out of time. It was a great honor and privilege to have you here. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you very much, too.